Hello everybody and welcome to the new Serial Killer Unsolved Iceberg Part 2. Really quick, this is a Part 2. Part 1 I will be over here if you haven't seen it yet. I would suggest you do. Just like the last video, I will use mostly gameplay in this one. However, my pictures won't be as long because I had a couple claims changed that last time. But all the mushy and gushy stuff will be at the end of the video, so please just stick around for that, and I'll see you guys at the end. Later. The Honolulu Strangler. The Honolulu Strangler is the nickname given to an unidentified serial killer who is credited with killing 5 women in Hawaii from 1985 to 1986. The Honolulu Police Department had established a 27-person serial killer task force on February 5th with help from the FBI and the Green River Police Department. The killer's profile was that of an opportunist who would attack women who were vulnerable, such as at bus stops, not one who would stalk his victims. Police followed the suspect. $2,500 reward for information was put out by private businesses. 2 months after an arrest of a suspect, a woman came forward and claimed she saw him with a man on the night of a murder. She successfully picked the suspect out of a photo lineup as well. She did not want to be a witness because she believed that he had seen her as well. The Moores Ford lynchings. Murders of 4 young African Americans by a mob of white men, but the 4 victims, 2 of them being married couples, were shot and killed on a nearby dirt road. The FBI investigated for 4 months in 1946, the first time it had been ordered to investigate a civil rights case, but it was unable to discover sufficient evidence to bring any charges to anybody. The bombing of United Airlines Boeing 247. The transcontinental flight carried 3 crew and 4 passengers and originated in Newkirk, New Jersey, with its final destination in Oakland, California. It had already landed in Cleveland and was headed to its next stop in Chicago when it exploded on the route. All aboard died in the crash, which was caused by an onboard explosive device. Eyewitnesses on the ground reported hearing an explosion shortly after 9 p.m. and seeing the aircraft in flames at an altitude around 1,000 feet. A second explosion followed after the aircraft crashed. The crash scene was adjacent to a gravel road about 5 miles away. The Family Murders. The Family Murders is a name given to a series of 5 murders speculated to have been committed by a loosely connected group of individuals who came to be known as the Family. This group was believed to be involved in the kidnapping and sexual abuse of a number of teenage boys and young men, as well as the torture and murder of 5 young men aged between 14 and 25 in South Australia. Only 1 suspect has been charged and convicted for the crimes, Bevan Spencer Enham, and in 1984 was sentenced to a minimum of 24 years. The Teardrop Rapist. The Teardrop Rapist is a moniker for an unidentified serial rapist responsible for 35 sexual assaults on women, including minors, in California. The assaults began in 1996 and continued all the way till 2012. He is believed to be an Hispanic male with a light complexion and received his nickname from the 1 teardrop tattoo he has under his eye. The perpetrator was thought to have stopped his assaults in 2005, but in November 2011, a 15-year-old girl was attacked, and DNA evidence was linked to the exact same rapist. However, the victim did not see the tattoo that many of the previous victims had, perhaps due to a tattoo removal. The Laugardia Airport Bombing. On December 29, 1975, a bomb detonated near the TWA baggage reclaim terminal at Laugardia Airport in New York City. The blast killed 11 people and seriously injured 74. The perpetrators were never identified. The LaGuardia Airport bombing, deadliest attack by a non-state actor to occur on American soil since the 1927 Bath School bombings. The West Fertilizer Company explosion. On April 17, 2013, an ammonium nitrate explosion occurred at the West Fertilizer Company's storage and distribution facility in West Texas, United States, while emergency services personnel were responding to fire at the facility. 15 people were killed, more than 160 were injured, and more than 150 buildings were damaged or destroyed. Investigators confirmed that ammonium nitrate was the material that had exploded. The Leathers Oil Company Murders. The Leathers Oil Company Murders refers to an unsolved mass murder that occurred in Gresham, Oregon, on January 17, 1994, each of whom were employed at the Leathers Oil Company gas station. Their bodies were discovered in a storage room on the premise, each having been shot to death. The station was also robbed of approximately $9,000. No suspect was ever found. The West Memphis Temple. The West Memphis Temple refers to 3 men being convicted as teenagers in 1994 of the 1993 murders of 3 boys in West Memphis, Arkansas, United States. During the trial, the prosecution asserted that the juveniles killed the children as part of a satanic ritual. Due to the dubious nature of the evidence, as well as the suspected presence of emotional bias in court, the case generated widespread controversy and was the subject of several documentaries. Celebrities and musicians held fundraisers to free the men. The Myojo 56 building arson. The Myojo 56 building arson was a structural fire that began at 1 a.m. local time on September 1, 2001 at the Myojo 56 building, located in Shinjuku, Tokyo, Japan. This burned for 5 hours before being extinguished and resulted in the deaths of 44 people. It is expected that the fire resulted from arson, but no suspect was ever arrested. In the aftermath of the incident, media coverage focused on the arrest and conviction of the property owners for criminal negligence and on the building's putative ties to organized crime. The Wall Street City bombing. On Thursday, September 16, 1920, a bomb went off in the financial district of Manhattan, New York City. The blast killed 30 people immediately, and another 10 died later of wounds sustained from the blast. There were 143 seriously injured, and the total number of injured was in the hundreds. The bombing was never solved, although investigators and historians believe it was carried out by an Italian anarchist. The Cowden family murders. Richard and Belinda Cowden and their son disappeared from their campground in the mountains near Copper, Oregon, United States, on the 1st of September 1974. 7 months later, in April 1975, their bodies were discovered approximately 7 miles from their campsite. While law enforcement has expected convicted killer Dwayne Lee Little in their murders, their case remains unsolved. The Ann Arbor Hospital Murders. The Ann Arbor Hospital Murders were the murders of 10 patients by unauthorized administration in their IV of a Carrier drug pavilion in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Following a vast FBI investigation into the deaths, nurse Filipina Narcisco and Leonora Perez were charged with the murder, but only found guilty on poisoning and conspiracy charges. Public opinion was against prosecution of the nurses, on the basis that they could have only had the most trivial of possible motives for conspiring to commit such serious crimes, and the case was dropped after a retrial was ordered. Alright, we got 2 more stages to go. Let's get right into it. The Disappearance in Azir. The Disappearance in Azir is a collective name given between 9 and 12 disappearances of children in the French department of Azir between 1983 and 1996. Some children were only murdered, 1 was attacked, and others had survived. Only 3 out of the 12 cases have been solved, however, no killer has been found. The Saw Killer of Hanover. The Saw Killer of Hanover is a name given to an unidentified German serial killer who was supposedly responsible for murdering and dismembering at least 4 women and 2 men, whose body parts were found in Hanover and the surrounding area in the 1970s. The body parts were disposed of on Saturdays in conspicuous places so that they could easily be found by passerbys, according to the torso. The offender did not have a profound anatomical knowledge, with the cuts being made at the joints, suggesting it might be the work of a butcher. The Teardrop North and Frankston murders refers to the deaths of 6 girls and women who, in the period between May 1980 and October 1981, were taken, murdered, and dumped in a remote scrub in Teardrop North and Frankston areas southeast of Melbourne, Australia. Later, the suburb of Frankston came to the national attention again as a result of Frankston serial killings in the mid-1993. Later, the suburb of Frankston came to national attention again as a result of the Frankston serial killings in the mid-1993. In 2017, increased rewards were offered for each of the cold cases. The Lava Lake Murders. The Lava Lake Murders refers to a triple murder that occurred near Little Lake in Central Oregon in January 1924. The victims were Edward Nichols Roy Wilson and Dewey Morris, all of whom were working as fur trappers in National Forest in late 1923 to 1924. Their bodies were discovered in Little Lava Lake in April of 1924, deposited under the surface ice. Each of the men had been murdered via gunshot and blunt force trauma. Though police identified a potential suspect, Charles Kimsey, no one was ever convicted of the crime. The Denver Prostitute Killer. The Denver Prostitute Killer is the nickname of an identified American serial killer responsible for the murder of at least 17 women and girls in Denver and its various suburbs between 1975 and 1995. The killings were grouped together only in 2008. Until then, each of these crimes were considered to have been committed by completely different people. The San Fransisco Train derailment. On August 12, 1939, the city of San Fransisco Train derailed outside of Harney, Nevada, killing 24 and injuring 121 passengers and crew. The derailment was caused by sabotage of the tracks. Despite a manhunt, reward offers, and years of investigation by the Southern Pacific Railroad, the case remains unsolved. The Dayton Strangler. The Dayton Strangler was an unidentified early 20th century serial killer responsible for the murders of 5 women and 1 man in Dayton, Ohio, from 1900 to 1909. Although a multitude of suspects were arrested, including one who was wrongfully convicted, the murders remain officially unsolved to this day. The Chen family murders. In the early afternoon of October 8, 2014, a co-worker of Chen Jin of Golderland, New York, United States, found the bodies of Chen, his wife, and their 2 children in their home. Police were called to the scene and determined that the family had been killed sometime in the hours before dawn that day by either a knife or a hammer. The murderer was never found. The Duck Walk Killer. The Duck Walk Killer is a spree killer in the Rogers Park neighborhood in Chicago, Illinois. The Duck Walk Killer murdered at least 2 individuals. Douglas Watts, 73, was shot in the head at point-blank range while walking his dog on the morning of Sunday, September 30, 2018. At the time of the murder, police say that there was no apparent motive and that Mr. Watts was not robbed. Elijah Moskowitz, who was 24, was shot in the head while walking home on the evening of Monday, October 1st, 2018. Police were unable to determine a motive for the murder of him either, and he was also not robbed. The killer has not been found. The A6 Disappearances. The A6 Disappearances is a name given to a number of mysterious disappearances or other crimes involving women and girls occurring in the 1980s and 1990s along a 200-kilometer stretch of the A6 motorway around France. The area has been informally referred to as the Triangle of Fear. The crimes took place between the 22nd of August 1984 and the 2nd of April 2005. Although the police have solved crimes of the murders, they are unsure of whether the remaining unsolved cases are coincidences or the work of one or more serial killers. The Ardenwald Axe Murders is an unsolved mass murder that occurred in the early morning of June 9, 1911 in Ardenwald, Oregon, then a neighboring community of Portland. The victims were the Hill family, William Hill and his wife Ruth, and 2 children from a previous marriage. Philip and Dorothy and all the other victims were bludgeoned to death with an axe. Dr. No. Dr. No is the nickname given to a suspected American serial killer, thought to be responsible for the murders of at least 9 women and girls in Ohio between 1981 and 2004. As victims, he primarily chose prostitutes working in parking lots and truck stops alongside Interstate 71. There are suspicions that he committed 3 similar killings in New York, Illinois, and Pennsylvania between 1986 and 1988. Let's dive into the one before last. El Pisopata. The alias given to an unidentified Costa Rican serial killer responsible for the murders of 19 people from 1986 to 1996 in the cities of Cartago and Desamparados. His victims were single women or heterosexual couples who were charged, attacked in places with little traffic during the night, especially in the area between Cartago and Desamparados, which at the time was called the Triangle of Death. The Kotakithana Murders. The Kotakithana Murders refers to a series of 15 mysterious murders of women, including 3 double murders. Starting from 2008, the youngest victim was 19 years old, and the eldest being 85. One 35-year-old male suspect was arrested in December of 2015, and his DNA matched with 6 of the murders. The Redhead Murders. The Redhead Murders refers to an unsolved homicide of redheaded females in the United States between October 1978 and 1992, believed to have been committed by an unidentified male serial killer. The murders believed to be related to occurring in the states including Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. The victims, many remaining unidentified for years, were usually women with red hair, whose bodies were abandoned along major highways in the United States. Officials believe that the women were likely hitchhiking or have engaged in sex work. Authorities are unsure how many people are responsible for these murders, and if they are all performed by the same person, and how many people they have murdered. The Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. The Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders were a series of at least 7 unsolved homicides involving female hitchhikers that took place in Sonoma County in Santa Rosa of the North Bay area of California in 1972 and 1973. All of the victims were found nude in rural areas near steep embankments or in creek beds near the road. The Bigfoot Killer. The Bigfoot Killer is a name given to an unidentified American serial killer who raped and murdered 7 girls and women in Detroit between February and October 1975. All of the victims were engaged in prostitution and impoverished, with their killings taking place in the Cass Corridor neighborhood. According to the police, he may have suffered from acromegaly, since, according to testimonies and other evidence, he had large hands and feet. As a result of this, he was nicknamed Bigfoot. The Hospital for Sick Children Deaths. The Hospital for Sick Children Deaths, believed to be homicides, occurred in the cardiac ward hospital of the Hospital for Sick Children between July 1980 and March 1981. They ended when the police were called in, and the Digitalis-type medication possibly used for the alleged killings began to be kept under lock and key. 3 nurses were at the center of the investigation in an apparent attempt to poison nurses' food. One of the nurses, Susan Nels, was charged with 4 of the murders, but the prosecution was dismissed a year later on the grounds that she could have not been responsible for the death, not included in the indictment, which the judge deemed a murder. The I-70 Strangler. The I-70 Strangler is the nickname given to an unidentified unidentified American serial killer who killed 12 gay men in Indiana and Ohio between June 1980 and October 1991, dumping their bodies near the Interstate 70. Though officially unsolved, it is believed that deceased serial killer Herb Baumeister. The Eastbound Strangler. The Eastbound Strangler is an unidentified serial killer believed to be responsible for the murders of 4 women near Atlantic City, New Jersey in 2006. A $25,000 reward offered for information has gone unclaimed. 4 dead bodies of young women identified as prostitutes were found in the drainage ditch, followed with shallow water, on November 20th, 2006. The Cumminsville Murders. The Cumminsville Murders were a series of 5 unsolved serial murders which occurred in the present-day Cincinnati neighborhood of South Cumminsville between 1904 and 1910. After taking a 6-year-long period of inactivity, the killings resumed with 2 new victims in 1910 before abruptly ceasing again, never to continue. The Rainbow Maniac. The Rainbow Maniac refers to a series of 13 murders of gay men committed between February 2007 and August 2008. The murders took place in Petras Park, Brazil, and were perpetrated by an unidentified serial killer. Police arrested a retired state police sergeant, Gerio Franco, based on witness statements implicating him, a murderer. A witness claims to have seen Franco shoot a black gay man 12 times that night. Another witness told that Franco often visited the park to look for gay men. The Uni Phantom. The Uni Phantom refers to a German sex offender who is said to have committed up to 21 assaults, first in Ennepe Kreis and later moving to Bochum. The first was committed in 1994, with the last assigned to him occurring in 2002. Strikingly, there are even more intervals between sexual assaults. It never passed more than half a year before the next one. Even after many years, evidence still reaches in Bochum, with the investigation still persisting. The Batman Rapist. The Batman Rapist refers to an English serial sex offender who has committed at least 17 attacks on women in the city of Bath, Somerset. Leading the operation, said it is one of the most complicated and protracted investigations that the force has ever taken. He was nicknamed after leaving a baseball cap bearing a logo from the Batman film series at the scene of one attack. Police believe that there are more victims who have never came forward. The independent crime-fighting charity Crime Stoppers UK have offered £10,000 reporting the information leading to his capture. He has also been referred by the news as the Riddler, the North Kanto serial killer. The North Kanto serial killer is a serial kidnapping and murder case that has been going on since 1979 in Japan's Togichi and Gunma prefectures. The Asuga murder case is also included in this. Since 1979, there have been 5 cases of kidnapping and/or murder of young girls between ages 4 and 8. 4 kidnappings and murders, 1 kidnapping where the kidnapped girl was never found. The Tube Sock Killings. The Tube Sock Killings is a series of unsolved murders that occurred in remote areas of Lewis and Pierce County, Washington, in 1985. The murder cases were widely publicized and were featured on the television series Unsolved Mysteries in 1989. Mike Reimer took his girlfriend and daughter into the woods and essentially went crazy, killed his girlfriend, and left his daughter on the side of the road. I suggest you dig a little deeper to find out more about this story. Stoneman. Stoneman is the name given by a popular English language print media of Calcutta, India, to an unidentified serial killer who murdered at least 13 homeless people in Calcutta during their sleep in 1989. The name is also given to a perpetrator of a similar series of murders in Bombay from 1985 to 1988. It has been speculated that these were the work of the same person, who could have been responsible for as many as 26 murders. I just want to take this time to say thank you. If you've watched the entire last video and have made it this far, that's awesome. Thank you for wanting to listen to my voice for that long. I have a lot of videos planned for the future, and I hope to gain a larger audience so I can have more subscribers and make more videos. So, thank you. Without further ado, let's dive right in. The Milwaukee Police Department bombings. The Milwaukee Police Department bombings was on November 24th, 1917. It was a bomb attack that killed 9 members of local law enforcement and a civilian in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The perpetrators were never caught, but are suspected to be an anarchist terrorist cell operating in the United States in the early 20th century. The target was initially an evangelical church in the 3rd Ward and only killed the police officers when the bomb was taken to a police station by a concerned civilian. The Monster of Mangones. The Monster of Mangones is the name given to an unidentified Colombian serial killer who between the 1960s and 1970s murdered between 30 to 38 children, adolescents in California, believed to be native of the city. He would kidnap and later kill most of his victims in various remote vacant lots. His MO consisted of inserting needles into the heart and thorax. The killer was described as a true sexual sadist and probably suffered from clinical vampirism. The B1 Butcher. The B1 Butcher, unknown serial killer in Namibia, which is close to South Africa. The B1 Butcher murdered at least 5 women between 2005 and 2007, with all murders related to the National Road B1. In 2007, a German-born Namibian was accused of rape, arrested, and later linked to these unsolved murders. However, it was after a long detention acquitted for lack of evidence. In 2008, a man who committed suicide was implicated as a series of murders ended in 2007, but the connection could not be conclusively proven. The murder series caused considerable public criticism of the effectiveness and efficiency of the Namibian police, also in other violent crimes cases like the murder of the Mandela Stoffels. The Castration Serial Murders. The Castration Serial Murders were a series of murders of young men committed in between 2 and at least 5 American states between August 1980 and November 1986. All the victims were kidnapped, shot in the back of the head, and castrated post-mortem, from which the case got its namesake. They were initially considered unrelated due to the crime scene's geographic remoteness until 1989, when forensic evidence concluded that 2 of the victims had been killed with the same revolver, with the other 3 likely being related as well. The Sewer Murders. The Sewer Murders were an unexplained series of murders of male adolescents in the Frankfurt-Rheinmain area during the 1970s and 1980s. The boys' hands were tied to the back with a rope or a cord and then killed by apparent blunt force trauma. For some, however, death was presumably occurred by drowning in the sewage, due to long submersion in the sewage and partly strong damage to the corpse by screw conveyors. The victims were identified relatively late, and on only one, clear signs of blunt force trauma to the head could be found. The February 9th Killer. The February 9th killer, believed to be responsible for the 2006 murder of Sonia Meja and her unborn baby, and the 2008 murder of Damiana Castillo in Salt Lake County, Utah. The murders were committed on the same day, February 9th, hence the name. Joro the Paver. Joro the Paver is a serial rapist and murderer from the Conscrivita neighborhood who operated in Sofia in 1968. In a span of a few months, between 6 and 7 rapes occurred, as a result of which a 69-year-old woman died in the hospital. The nickname Joro the Paver comes from the paver found on the scene, wrapped up in a handkerchief next to one of his victims. The Wednesday Strangler. The Wednesday Strangler is an unidentified Japanese serial killer responsible for the murders of 7 women in Saga Prefecture from 1975 and 1989. The nickname comes from the fact that the 6 of the victims disappeared on a Wednesday. The killings are also referred to as the Saga Women Murders. All of these murders have in common is that 6 of the 7 cases the victims disappeared on a Wednesday. They vanished during the evening or night hours, and 5 of the deaths were due to strangulation. The Father's Day Bank Massacre. The Father's Day Bank Massacre was a bank robbery and shooting that took place on Sunday, June 16, 1991, at the United Bank Tower, now a Wells Fargo Center, in Denver, Colorado. The perpetrator killed 4 unarmed bank guards and held up 6 tellers in the bank's cash vault. An estimated $200,000 was stolen from the bank. Nearly 3 weeks later, on July 4, 1991, authorities arrested retired police officer James W. King for the crime. The subsequent trial was broadcasted nationally on court TV. After days of deliberation, the jury acquitted King. None of the stolen money was ever found. The crime remains unsolved and is considered a cold case. The Hemlock Valley Murders. The Hemlock Valley Murders were where 3 women's bodies were found within the same remote bush of British Columbia's Fraser Valley. The murders remain unsolved. All 3 women were determined to be victims of homicide, and the cause of death was similar enough that police believed that they were all murdered by the same killer. The serial killer, however, was never found. The Janicle Killer. On March 21, 2021, a mass grave containing the mutilated corpses of 4 teenage boys was found by a shepherd's dog in the Janicle area of Pakistan. Soon after discovering the bodies, a protest sit-in started in Janicle on March 28th. About 10,000 protesters embarked on a long march from Janicle to Peshawar in Islamabad with the dead bodies to demand actions against militants. The Pharmacy Maniac. The Pharmacy Maniac is the name of an unidentified Russian serial killer who killed 2 men in Chelyabinsk in 2011, both of them in pharmacies. He remains uncaptured and his motives have not been fully established. There is an assumption by some that the killer has bipolar disorder, but conclusions from the expert of the regional psychoneural hospital who made up the offender profile claim the opposite. Psychiatrists believe he had a mercenary motive, but due to the lack of experience, the killer left the crime scene before taking much money or valuables. The Flat Tire Murders. The Flat Tire Murders, occurring between February 1975 and January 1976, the name originated from the investigators' belief that, when the offender committed 2 of the murders, he had deflated the tires of the victims' cars. The list of the suspected victims ultimately included 12 girls and women whose bodies were discovered in or near South Florida canals. Some forensic experts have questioned whether a single offender was responsible for all the murders, while others have proclaimed that the murderer might have killed more than 30 women in multiple states. The Pittsburgh Serial Murders. The Pittsburgh Serial Murders refers to the killings of 1 man and 4 women in the city of Pittsburgh, California, between 1998 and 1999. Some of the victims either engaged in prostitution or were drug addicts. Despite an investigation by the FBI and a financial reward for the killer or killers' capture being offered by the then Governor of California, Gray Davis, none of the murders were ever solved. The Sleepy Hollow Killer. The Sleepy Hollow Killer is the name of an unidentified South African rapist and serial killer, thought to be responsible for the rapes and murders of at least 13 women, most likely sex workers, around Pietermaritzburg in Midlands of KwaZulu-Natal. His signature was to strangle his victims using their panties, a characteristic shared with the murders of 3 prostitutes in 2007, who are also considered to be possible victims. The Chicago Strangler. The Chicago Strangler is a nickname for an unconfirmed serial killer, or serial killers, believed to be responsible for the deaths of many women and girls in Chicago. At least 75 girls and women, predominantly black, between the ages of 18 and 58, have been killed in a similar fashion. Most of the victims were sex workers who had previous encounters with the justice system. Nearly all were strangled and partially or fully stripped, and left in abandoned buildings, alleys, garbage bins, parks, and snow drifts. 25 of the cases were closed by police, resulting in 13 men being arrested. The Lodz Gay Murderer. The Lodz Gay Murderer is an unidentified Polish serial killer who operated in Lodz from 1988 to 1993. He murdered 7 men. All victims were connected by the fact that they were homosexual people, died in their own flats, and right after during sexual intercourse. The perpetrator stole, among other things, TVs, videos, jewelry, cash, and other items from the apartments of the murdered men. The Barnewall Maniac. The Barnewall Maniac is the name of an unidentified Russian serial killer who committed the murders of 9 girls and 2 women from 1997 to 2000 in the city of Barnewall. The motives of the perpetrator remain unknown, with the main suspect of the murders having committed suicide in November 2000. The Stolerio Yakman Chakas Murders refers to a series of 3 unsolved murders that took place in Israel in 1960s. The murders, which were never solved, aroused a great deal of public interest, and due to similarities between them, they have been widely speculated to have been the work of a serial killer of Soviet intelligence. The Hendricks Axe Murders. David Hendricks is an American businessman convicted of killing his wife and children in 1984, but acquitted in retrial in 1991. Police charged Hendricks with murdering his family, but they lacked a concrete motive. Hendricks' defense attorney hammered away at the only physical evidence against him, pointing out that physical activity or trauma can affect the rate of digestion. Still, the jury found Hendricks guilty of 4 counts of murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment on December 21st, 1988. In 1991, Hendricks was retried and found not guilty. The Manita Sanita Murders is a controversial, unsolved rape and murder of 3 girls that took place in 1980, with a single witness. The witness, Chirmani Arikari, later committed suicide, as the official report in the case went unsolved. This one has a lot of non-YouTube friendly stuff that I cannot get into, but once again, there will be something in the description for you so you can read it yourself. The South County Car Bomber, as a person or persons who terrorized South St. Louis County, Missouri, with a series of fatal car bombings in 1977. Sterigos escaped an injury in an earlier attack on October 7, 1977. 2 people, Shirley Flynn and Robert Jackson, were killed in the bombings. The bombings ceased after that and were never solved. Despite an extensive effort by police, the bombings appeared to have been random, and some investigators believed that they were the work of a deranged individual. And finally, Shotgun Man. Shotgun Man was an assassin and spree killer in Chicago, Illinois, in the 1910s. Most notably, Shotgun Man killed 15 Italian immigrants from January 1st to March 26, 1911, at Death Corner, the intersection of Oak Street and Milton Avenue. Alright, and that is going to do it for this video, everybody. Thank you for hanging out for this long ride. I might do a breakdown video on my favorite ones that I liked, just so I can get some more content for you guys. But like I said, I already have some videos in the works and getting worked on. So please hit that subscribe button, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I'll see you later.